Laptop blues. The screen flickered, a malevolent strobe in the dim room. Maya squinted, willing the lecture on post-structuralism to resolve itself. It didn't. Instead, the image dissolved into a chaotic mess of pixelated snow, followed by the dreaded blue screen of death. A wave of nausea washed over her. Not now. Not during Foucault. She slammed her fist gently, she told herself on the spacebar. Nothing. Control plus Alt plus Delete. Nada. The laptop, affectionately nicknamed Betsy despite its treachery, was officially bricked. Panic bloomed in her chest. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience, it was a full-blown academic catastrophe. The semester was nearing its end, deadlines loomed like monstrous paperclips, and her meticulously crafted notes on Derrida were trapped inside Betsy's unresponsive metal shell. Options swirled in her head, each more unappealing than the last. The university's IT department. A bureaucratic black hole where requests went to die. A repair shop. Exorbitantly expensive, and who knew how long they'd keep Betsy hostage? Buy a new laptop. Utterly impossible on her student budget. Then, a thought surfaced, unwelcome but persistent. George. George, her neighbor from across the hall, the retired engineer with a perpetually curious glint in his eye and a workshop overflowing with wires and circuit boards. He'd mentioned, casually, that he dabbled in computer repair. The idea made her squirm. Asking George for help felt awkward. Their interactions had been limited to polite nods in the hallway and brief conversations about the weather. He was nice, undeniably, but he was also older. 63, to be precise. And there was something about his gaze, a lingering intensity, that made her feel strangely self-conscious. She chewed on her lip, weighing the pros and cons, pride versus pragmatism. Academic survival versus potential social discomfort. Pragmatism won, but only just. Sucking in a deep breath, Maya closed Betsy's lifeless lid and padded barefoot across the hall. The carpet was worn, the floral pattern faded, a testament to the building's age. She hesitated in front of George's door, listening for any sign of life. Silence. Her knuckles hovered over the wood. This was it. No turning back now. She knocked, the sound surprisingly loud in the quiet hallway. A moment of agonizing silence stretched before she heard movement inside. The clink of metal on metal, followed by a shuffling sound. Then, the door creaked open, revealing George. He was wearing a faded blue t-shirt, and a pair of glasses perched on the end of his nose. His silver hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been tinkering with something intricate. Maya, he said, a warm smile spreading across his face. What a pleasant surprise. Is everything all right? His eyes, the same intense blue as his t-shirt, held a spark of genuine concern. She clutched the strap of her messenger bag, suddenly feeling very small and vulnerable. Actually, George, she began, her voice barely a whisper. I think my laptop might be dead. The engineer next door. George appeared at his screen door as if summoned. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes held a glint of something. Curiosity, maybe. Problem, he asked, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the porch floor. I held up the offending laptop. It won't boot. Just a black screen. I've tried everything I can think of. He took the laptop gingerly, as if handling a fragile artifact. His fingers, calloused and stained with what looked like oil, traced the edge of the case. He flipped it over, examining the vents, then pressed the power button. The screen remained stubbornly dark. A low hum emanated from within, then faded into silence. He murmured, his brow furrowing. He smelled faintly of sawdust and something metallic, like soldering. Sounds like a hard drive issue. Corrupted, most likely. Corrupted. My stomach dropped. All my notes, my photos, everything was on that drive. Can it be fixed? George shrugged, a gesture that didn't offer much comfort. Depends on the extent of the damage. Could be a simple boot sector repair, could be more complicated. He paused, looking at me with an intensity that made me shift uncomfortably. Don't suppose you backed it up? I winced. I meant to. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. He sighed, a puff of air that ruffled his gray hair. Kids these days, he muttered, but there was a hint of fondness in his voice. He looked back at the laptop, then back at me. The porch swing creaked in the sudden quiet. Look, he said, his gaze softening. Bring it inside. I've got some tools that might help. No promises, mind you, but I can take a look. He gestured towards his open doorway. Got a proper workspace set up in the back. Hesitantly, I followed him inside. The air in his house was cool and smelled of beeswax and something indefinably old. It was dimly lit, the curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. We walked through a living room cluttered with stacks of books and disassembled clocks, then down a narrow hallway. At the end was a door slightly ajar, light spilling out from within. George pushed the door open further, revealing a room that was a stark contrast to the rest of the house. It was brightly lit, meticulously organized, and filled with an impressive array of tools and electronic equipment. A soldering iron rested on a stand, its tip glowing faintly. Wires, circuit boards, and various components were neatly arranged in drawers and on shelves. It was a tech lover's dream, a chaotic but clearly functional laboratory. Welcome to my humble abode of tinkering, he said with a wry smile, finally meeting my eye. Let's see if we can resurrect your digital life. Sparks of connection. The tiny screwdriver whirred, a high-pitched counterpoint to the jazz drifting from George's ancient stereo. Maya watched fascinated as he delicately detached the old hard drive, his movements precise and surprisingly nimble for a man his age. The air smelled faintly of dust and ozone, a peculiar scent combination unique to George's cluttered apartment. There, he said, holding up the offending component like a trophy. The culprit. Ready for its replacement. He slid the new drive into place, the click a small sound of finality. Now for the moment of truth, he murmured, plugging in the laptop and pressing the power button. The screen flickered, then bloomed with the familiar logo. Maya exhaled, a knot she hadn't realized was there loosening in her chest. You're a lifesaver, George. Seriously. I have a paper due on Friday. What's the paper on? He leaned back, regarding her with those surprisingly intense blue eyes. The socio-economic impact of streaming services on independent filmmakers. George stroked his chin, a thoughtful expression on his face. Ah, interesting. A double-edged sword, I imagine. Increased accessibility, but also a dilution of quality, perhaps. Maya blinked. Exactly. It's hard to find people who even understand the nuances. She usually got blank stares or a dismissive, just watch something else from her peers. I spent years navigating the independent film scene, George said, a hint of something unreadable in his voice. Before I retired. You were a filmmaker? Maya asked, genuinely surprised. She had envisioned him as an accountant, maybe, or a retired librarian. Something sedate. Among other things. Mostly behind the camera. Lighting, sound. The unsung heroes, you know. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. But enough about my ancient history. What are you watching these days? Anything worthwhile? Maya hesitated. Well, I've been going through a classic film phase. Trying to catch up on everything I missed. Classic, eh? Define classic. He raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in his eye. You know, Hitchcock, Wells, Wilder, George grinned. Wilder. Now you're talking. Some Like It Hot is a masterpiece. The pacing, the dialogue, flawless. I know, right? Maya exclaimed, her voice rising in excitement. And the ending. Nobody's perfect. They launched into a rapid-fire discussion, dissecting scenes, quoting lines, arguing over directorial choices. Maya found herself laughing, truly laughing, in a way she hadn't in weeks. George's passion was infectious, his knowledge encyclopedic. The age gap seemed to dissolve, replaced by a shared enthusiasm that crackled in the small apartment. As the jazz music faded and the laptop hummed quietly, a different kind of spark ignited, a connection unexpected and undeniably present. The air felt warmer, charged with a subtle energy that made Maya's skin prickle. Lost and found, almost. Done. George declared, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. He leaned back from Maya's desk, wiping a smudge of grease from his cheek with the back of his hand. The replaced hard drive hummed quietly within the computer tower, a low, almost contented thrum. Good as new. Maybe even better. This one's got more space. Maya bounced on the balls of her feet, relief flooding through her. Seriously. You're a lifesaver, George. I don't know what I would have done. She navigated to the desktop, the familiar icons blinking back at her. She clicked on the project folder. Empty. Her stomach plummeted. She clicked again, harder this time, as if force could conjure the missing files. Still empty. A frantic energy seized her. She started clicking through other folders, each blank space a fresh wave of nausea. What's wrong? George asked, his smile faltering. My project, she whispered, her voice catching. It's all gone. Everything. George peered over her shoulder. Gone? How can it be gone? I copied everything over before I formatted the old drive. His brow furrowed in concentration. He clicked through a few folders himself, his movements becoming quicker, more urgent. There has to be a backup somewhere. He began a systematic search, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Maya stood frozen, watching him, a growing knot of dread tightening in her chest. The air in the small room felt thick, heavy with unspoken panic. The hum of the new hard drive, moments ago a sound of promise, now mocked her with its relentless regularity. After what felt like an eternity, George stopped, his shoulders slumping. He turned to Maya, his eyes filled with a helpless sympathy. I don't understand. I don't see it anywhere. I'm so sorry, Maya. The dam broke. No, she cried, her voice rising in pitch. This can't be happening. My deadline is next week. I've been working on this for months. It's everything. My scholarship, my future. Tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision. She sank into her chair, her body shaking with sobs. The weight of the lost work, the looming deadline, the crushing sense of failure, all coalesced into an unbearable burden. Hey, it's okay, George said, his voice laced with concern. He knelt beside her, awkwardly patting her arm. We'll figure something out. We'll try data recovery software. There's gotta be a way. But Maya couldn't hear him. All she could see was the blank screen, the empty folders, the shattered remnants of her hopes. The silence in the room, punctuated only by her ragged breathing, was deafening. The project wasn't just lost, a part of her felt lost with it. The recovery mission. Don't worry, Maya, George said, his voice low and reassuring. I'll see what I can do. No promises, mind you, but I've wrestled worse things back from the digital abyss. He pushed his glasses up his nose, a familiar gesture that somehow calmed her frayed nerves. The fluorescent lights of her tiny apartment hummed, casting a sterile glow on the worry etched on her face. He felt a pang of guilt, seeing her so distressed. He'd offered the upgrade, after all. He waited until she'd retreated to her bedroom before touching the recalcitrant laptop. The air around him crackled with a strange energy, a mix of technological challenge and a deeper, more unsettling feeling he couldn't quite name. He transported the machine back to his own apartment, the familiar scent of old books and brewing coffee a welcome distraction. His workspace was a controlled chaos. Cables snaked across the desk like metallic vines, leading to a tower of drives and circuit boards. Under the soft glow of his desk lamp, he began his work, the rhythmic click of the keyboard his only companion. He bypassed the standard boot sequence, connecting the laptop directly to his forensic workstation. The screen flickered, displaying lines of code that scrolled too fast for the human eye to follow. Hours dissolved into a blur of concentration. He tried one recovery tool, then another, each a gamble against the encroaching digital decay. He hit a wall around 3 a.m. The sectors where Maya's project files had resided were stubbornly blank, overwritten by the failed update. He swore softly, the sound swallowed by the silence of the night. The building was quiet, the city outside a muted hum. He considered giving up, telling Maya it was a lost cause. But the image of her face, the disappointment shimmering in her eyes, spurred him on. He switched tactics, delving deeper into the hard drive's architecture. He ran a low-level scan, sifting through the raw data, searching for fragments, shadows of the lost files. The process was agonizingly slow, each percentage point a victory hard won. The digital clock on his monitor ticked relentlessly onward. The first rays of dawn peeked through the blinds, painting the room in a pale, ethereal light. He hadn't found much, just corrupted remnants, tantalizing glimpses of what had been. But he wasn't ready to quit. Not yet. He took a swig of cold coffee, the bitter taste a jolt to his weary senses, and returned to the screen, ready for another round with the ghost in the machine. A glimmer of hope. The knock was soft, hesitant, unlike George's usual confident rap. When Maya opened the door, he stood there, a small, battered USB drive held out in his palm like an offering. The morning sun caught the dust motes swirling around him, illuminating the anxious lines etched around his eyes. I managed to get some of it back, he said, his voice raspy. Not everything, I'm afraid. But maybe enough. He didn't meet her gaze, instead focusing on the worn floorboards of her porch. Maya took the drive, her fingers brushing his. A familiar jolt, unexpected and unwelcome, shot through her. She ignored it, her focus solely on the small piece of plastic that represented weeks of lost work. Can we try it now?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Inside, the air in her apartment felt thick with anticipation. George hovered near the doorway as she plugged the drive into her laptop. The screen flickered, the familiar loading bar inching across the display. Each agonizingly slow percentage point felt like a small victory. A folder popped open, its name a jumble of alphanumeric code. Maya navigated through the files, her breath catching in her throat as she recognized document titles, image thumbnails, even snippets of partially corrupted code. It wasn't everything, far from it, but it was enough. Enough to salvage the core of her project, enough to keep her from failing. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the screen. She swiveled in her chair, her gaze finding George. He still hadn't moved from the doorway, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. "George," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved me. You actually saved me." She launched herself from the chair, crossing the space between them in 2 swift strides. Throwing her arms around him, she hugged him tightly, burying her face in his shoulder. The scent of motor oil and something indefinably, him filled her senses. "Thank you," she repeated, her voice muffled against his worn leather jacket. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." He stiffened for a moment, then his arms tentatively wrapped around her, a comforting pressure against her back. I just did what I could," he mumbled, his voice rough. She pulled back, wiping the tears from her eyes. "What you could was a miracle. I don't know how to repay you." He shrugged, a flicker of a smile playing on his lips. "Pizza?" Maya laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. "Pizza sounds perfect. My treat." The pizza arrived, greasy and cheesy, a welcome distraction from the emotional roller coaster of the past few hours. They ate in comfortable silence, the unspoken connection between them humming in the air. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room. The files were still there, a tangible reminder of the glimmer of hope George had given her. Dinner and discoveries. I owe you big time, Maya said, fiddling with the strap of her bag as they stood outside her apartment door. George had spent the entire afternoon wrestling her ancient laptop back to something resembling functionality. George waved a dismissive hand. Don't worry about it. I enjoy a good puzzle. Still, Maya insisted. How about I cook you dinner? My turn to do something. Tonight. He hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. Are you sure? I wouldn't want to impose. Positive. Unless you're allergic to, well, what are you allergic to? He chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. Nothing that I know of. And I'm a pretty adventurous eater. Perfect. How's pasta with a vaguely Mediterranean vegetable sauce sound? Sounds fantastic. Inside her small kitchen, a controlled chaos reigned. Maya hummed along to the radio as she chopped bell peppers, the sharp scent filling the air. George, surprisingly, was an excellent sous chef. He efficiently minced garlic, his movements surprisingly deft for someone who claimed to spend most of his time reading. So, Maya said, tossing the peppers into a sizzling pan. What exactly do you read? Oh, everything. History, biographies, the occasional trashy thriller. He grinned, a flash of boyish charm. Keeps the mind sharp. I'm more of a Netflix person, myself, Maya admitted. Guilty pleasure. Don't be. Storytelling comes in many forms. He paused, stirring the pasta sauce thoughtfully. What are you studying at university? Literature, she said. Go figure. They laughed, the sound echoing in the small space. As they ate at her tiny kitchen table, the conversation flowed easily. George told her stories of his travels in his youth, backpacking through Europe with barely any money. Maya recounted embarrassing moments from high school, painting vivid pictures with her words. And then, she said, nearly choking on her pasta, I tripped, right in front of the entire football team, and my retainer flew out. I swear it bounced like 10 times. George's laughter was infectious, and soon Maya was laughing along with him, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't just amusement, it was something more. It was the feeling of shared vulnerability, of genuine connection. The air crackled with an unspoken energy, a comfortable intimacy that settled around them like a warm blanket. Dinner wasn't just food, it was an exchange, a building block in something she couldn't quite define but knew, with a growing certainty, was important. As she looked at him across the table, watching the way the light caught in his eyes, she knew this was only the beginning. Whispers on the wind. Mrs. Henderson, notorious for knowing everyone's business before they did, peered from behind her lace curtains. Maya and George were in his garden again, laughing. This time, George was showing Maya how to prune his prize-winning roses, his weathered hands gently guiding hers. Mrs. Henderson's lips pursed into a tight, disapproving line. She'd seen Maya, barely out of her teens, practically living at George's house lately. It wasn't natural. The following day, while Maya was picking up groceries at the corner store, she noticed Mrs. Gable giving her a peculiar look, a mixture of pity and thinly veiled disgust. Back home, while retrieving mail, she overheard snippets of conversation between two other neighbors watering their lawns. Always over there, poor George, doesn't look right. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy with unspoken judgment. That evening, Maya found George tinkering with his old radio in the garage. The scent of oil and dust filled the air, a familiar comfort. She hesitated, then blurted out, "People are talking, George." He stopped fiddling with a tube and turned to her, his brow furrowed. Talking? About what? She explained what she'd overheard, the suggestive glances, the hushed tones. The blood rushed to her face. George listened intently, his expression growing increasingly grim. When she finished, a long silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the radio. Finally, George sighed, a deep, weary sound. I suspected as much. Small towns are like that, aren't they? Always looking for something to chew on. He wiped his hands on a rag, the gesture somehow conveying a sense of resignation. We can't let them dictate our lives, Maya. But it's not fair, she protested, the frustration bubbling up inside her. They don't know anything about us. Precisely, George said, a glint of determination returning to his eyes. So we'll tell them. Not the details, of course, but enough to set their minds at ease. We'll have a tea party. Invite the whole neighborhood. Show them we're just friends, enjoying each other's company. Sunshine, smiles, and absolutely no secrets. Maya stared at him, a mixture of apprehension and admiration swirling within her. A tea party. It sounded absurd. But perhaps, just perhaps, it was exactly the right kind of absurd to silence the whispers on the wind. A farewell, not goodbye. The Colonel's the heart, Maya, George said, pointing a gnarled finger at the screen. Sunlight streamed through his dusty window, illuminating motes dancing in the air. Treat it right, understand its rhythms, and everything else will fall into place. I scribbled furiously in my notebook, trying to capture his every word. My system architecture assignment was due next week, and without George's impromptu lessons I'd be sunk. He had a way of explaining complex concepts that made them seem almost intuitive. He leaned back in his chair, the springs groaning in protest. So you think you've got a handle on preemptive multitasking now? I think so, I said, chewing on the end of my pen. But I still get tripped up on. He chuckled, a warm, rumbling sound. We'll get there. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was a robust operating system. He paused, a strange look crossing his face. Speaking of moving. I have something to tell you. My stomach clenched. He wasn't going to ask me to stop coming over, was he? I suddenly realized how much I'd come to rely on these sessions, not just for the tech advice, but for the companionship. He cleared his throat. I'm moving. Next month. The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Moving? Where? Arizona, he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. My daughter and her family are there. The grandkids are growing up fast and, well, I want to be a part of their lives. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a sharp pang of sadness. Arizona was far. Oh, was all I could manage. He saw the disappointment in my eyes. Hey now, he said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. His skin was papery thin, but his grip was surprisingly strong. This isn't goodbye. It's a farewell. There's a difference. But who's going to help me with my assignment? I blurted out, then immediately regretted it. That sounded selfish. He laughed. I've imparted all my wisdom, haven't I? Besides, there's this wonderful invention called the Internet. I'll even teach you how to remotely access my system before I leave. We spent the next hour delving deeper into the assignment, but a melancholic undercurrent had settled in the room. When I finally stood to leave, the setting sun casting long shadows across the floor, I felt a lump forming in my throat. Thank you, George, I said, my voice wavering slightly. For everything. He stood up too, his movements slower now. Don't mention it, Maya. It's been nice having someone to talk to about these things. Someone who actually listens. He paused, his eyes twinkling. Besides, you owe me. Who else am I going to complain to about the evils of proprietary software? I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. I'll hold you to that. We'll video call, right? You can tell me all about the Arizona sunsets. Every single one, he promised. He walked me to the door, a slight tremor in his hand as he reached out to squeeze my shoulder. Don't forget what I said about the Colonel. Never, I replied. As I walked away, I glanced back and saw him standing in the doorway, a small, solitary figure silhouetted against the fading light. A farewell, not goodbye. I repeated the phrase in my head, trying to make it a promise, not just a wish.